The massive ship appeared above Earth like a storm cloud made of metal and light. It stretched across the sky, casting shadows over entire continents. Ambassador Veltar stood at the center of the United Earth Assembly Hall, his crystalline body catching the light from a dozen different angles. Behind him, holographic displays showed the true scope of what humanity faced: 50,000 warships. The combined fleet of 12 alien species, each one more advanced than Earth's entire military. The ships hung in space like deadly stars, their weapons pointed toward the small blue planet that had dared to defy the greatest power in the galaxy. Representatives of humanity. Veltar's voice echoed through the hall, translated by machines into 100 human languages. The Hegemony Council has reached its final decision regarding your species. Secretary General Elena Vasquez sat in the front row, her hands folded calmly in her lap. Around her, the representatives of every nation on Earth listened in silence. They had known this day would come. For years, the warnings had grown more serious. For months, diplomatic channels had grown colder. Veltar activated another hologram. It showed human colonies scattered across the galaxy like seeds thrown by a careless hand. Mars with its great domed cities. Europa, where humans had built underwater laboratories beneath the ice. The mining stations around Jupiter. The farming worlds in the Alpha Centauri system. Hundreds of colonies, millions of humans, all depending on Earth for protection that Earth could not give. Your species has violated every law of civilized expansion. Veltar continued. You terraform worlds without permission from the Council. You establish colonies in space that belongs to others. You refuse to accept limits on your growth. Oh, seriously, you refuse to submit to the authority that has brought peace to the galaxy for 10,000 years. The ambassador's crystalline form pulsed with colors that human eyes could barely process. In his species' culture, these colors indicated authority, disappointment, and final judgment. To humans, he simply looked like an angry chandelier. The Council has studied your species extensively, Veltar said. We understand your psychology. We know how you think, how you react to pressure, how you respond to overwhelming force. We know you are capable of reason. Another hologram appeared showing battles from across galactic history. Proud alien warriors kneeling before hegemony forces. Advanced civilizations surrendering their weapons. Species after species accepting the Council's rule rather than face extinction. Every intelligent race reaches this moment, Veltar explained. The moment when they must choose between pride and survival. Every species that has stood where you stand now has made the rational choice. They have accepted our guidance. They have joined our community. They have prospered under our protection. Elena noticed that he said our when talking about the community, but their when talking about the species that joined it. Even in his moment of supposed generosity, the ambassador could not hide the truth. There were rulers and there were subjects. There was no equality in the hegemony's idea of community. Therefore, Veltar said, the Council offers humanity the same choice we have offered all species. Submit to hegemony authority. Accept our oversight of your expansion. Surrender 70% of your military assets as a sign of good faith. Do this, and your species will find its place in the galactic community. The numbers appeared in the air above his head, written in symbols that somehow made sense to every human in the room. 70% of Earth's fleet, 60% of the colonial militias, half of all space stations. The humans would be left with barely enough ships to patrol their own solar system. You have 7 days to provide your answer, Veltar said. If you refuse or if you attempt to delay, the combined fleets of the hegemony will begin the systematic destruction of human civilization. We will start with your outer colonies and work inward until you accept our terms, or until there are no humans left to accept them. The silence in the assembly hall was complete. Elena could hear her own heartbeat, could hear the quiet hum of the air recycling systems, could hear someone in the back row shifting nervously in their chair. 7 days to surrender their freedom, or face the end of everything they had built among the stars. Veltar studied the human faces around him. He had given this speech before to dozens of species. He knew what came next. The desperate questions about terms. The frantic attempts to negotiate better conditions. The pleading for more time. The eventual inevitable surrender. Secretary General Vasquez stood up slowly. She was not a tall woman, and next to the alien ambassador she looked tiny, but something in her posture, something in the way she held herself made her seem larger than the crystalline giant beside her. Thank you for your message, Ambassador, she said in a clear, calm voice. We have heard your terms. Veltar's body shifted through several colors that indicated confusion. Where were the desperate questions? Where was the panic he had seen in every other species? Do you require clarification of any terms? He asked. Do you need additional time to consider? Elena looked around the assembly hall. She saw fear in many faces, yes. But she also saw something else. She saw determination. She saw people who had already made their choice, who had made it years ago when they first learned that the galaxy was run by bullies who called themselves peacekeepers. No clarification needed, Elena said. Your terms are clear. Your intentions are clear. Then you accept? Elena Vasquez, elected representative of 8 billion human beings, chosen spokesperson for a species that had climbed from caves to stars in the blink of a cosmic eye, looked directly into Veltar's multifaceted eyes and gave humanity's answer. We decline politely. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Not we refuse or we reject or never, just we decline politely, as if the ambassador had offered her tea at an inconvenient time. Veltar's crystalline body went through a rapid series of color changes that his translation software could not process. Confusion, disbelief, anger, more confusion. This was not in any of his briefings. This was not how species responded to existential threats. You decline? He managed. Yes, Elena said. We appreciate the offer, but we must respectfully decline. You understand the consequences? We understand perfectly. You understand that we will destroy your species? We understand that you will try. Veltar stared at her for a long moment. Around the hall, human representatives sat quietly, as if they were discussing trade agreements instead of the end of their civilization. Some looked afraid, but none looked surprised. It was as if they had all known what Elena would say, had all agreed with it before she said it. Very well, Veltar said finally. 7 days. He began to fade as his transport beam took hold, but Elena's voice stopped him. Ambassador? Yes? Safe travels home. When the alien vanished, the assembly hall remained silent for several minutes. Then slowly, Elena Vasquez sat back down. Around her, the representatives of humanity began to file out quietly, each returning to their nations and colonies to deliver the news. There would be no negotiations, no desperate last-minute compromises, no begging for mercy from creatures who had already decided that humanity deserved none. In 7 days, the most powerful force in the galaxy would try to destroy them. But tonight humanity would sleep with clear consciences, knowing they had chosen dignity over survival. Above Earth, the alien fleet waited for the panic to begin. 3 days had passed since the ultimatum, and the hegemony monitoring stations detected something that made no sense at all. Nothing. Commander Zaltek of the Hegemony Intelligence Division stared at his screens in growing confusion. His sensors could track a single message across 1,000 star systems. His computers could decode the most complex military communications. His staff included experts on the psychology of 47 different species, but none of them could explain what humanity was doing. Show me the communication patterns again, he ordered his aide, a nervous Quellan named Fritzep. The holographic display materialized between them, showing the normal flow of messages throughout human space over the past year. Bright lines connected Earth to its colonies. Trade routes pulsed with data. Military channels carried routine patrol reports. It looked like the nervous system of a living creature, constantly active, constantly connected. Now show me the last 3 days. The display changed. The bright lines were still there, but they had changed completely. Trade data still flowed between colonies. Weather reports still broadcast from farming worlds. Children still sent messages to grandparents on distant planets. But there was something missing. No emergency communications. No frantic diplomatic channels. No coded military transmissions. No signs of panic at all. They are continuing their normal activities, Fritzep observed, his translator making his clicks and whistles sound confused in standard galactic. Supply convoys maintain their schedules. Construction projects proceed as planned. It is as if nothing has changed. Zaltek rubbed his temple ridges, a gesture that helped him think. In his experience with pre-conquest civilizations, the days after an ultimatum followed a predictable pattern. First came denial and desperate diplomatic activity, then military preparation, usually badly coordinated due to panic. Finally, either surrender or a futile military strike. Humans were doing none of these things. They were simply continuing. What about their military communications? He asked. Minimal, routine patrol reports, standard maintenance schedules. Some personnel transfers, but nothing unusual. Personnel transfers to where? Fritzep pulled up another display. scattered throughout human space. Some officers being moved to frontier colonies, some experienced soldiers being assigned to civilian construction projects. Again, nothing that suggests military preparation. On the flagship of the hegemony fleet, Ambassador Veltar paced in his crystalline chamber, his body flickering through colors that indicated deep frustration. Around him, representatives of the 12 hegemony species watched human space with growing unease. Perhaps they are preparing a surprise attack, suggested war leader Brocktar of the Corvan Empire. His species had conquered their way across 2 star systems before joining the hegemony, and he understood military thinking. Their silence could hide weapons preparation. Our sensors detect no such activity, replied Science Elder Nixara of the Vailnari Syndicate. Their manufacturing output remains focused on civilian goods, farming equipment, medical supplies, construction materials for new colonies. New colonies? Veltar's colors shifted to orange, indicating alarm. They are still establishing new colonies? 3 in the past 2 days, Nixara confirmed. Small settlements, perhaps a few hundred people each. They appear to be proceeding with planned expansion as if our ultimatum does not exist. Empath Zara Lynn of the Threnodi floated forward, her ethereal form shimmering with concern. Her species felt the emotions of others as clearly as their own thoughts, and what she sensed from human space disturbed her deeply. Their emotional state is unusual, she said softly. I detect fear, yes, but it is controlled fear. Manageable fear. What dominates their collective emotional signature is something else entirely. What? Veltar demanded. Acceptance. They have accepted their fate completely, but not with despair or resignation. With peace. They have made their choice and are comfortable with it. The conference chamber fell silent. Every species in the hegemony database had emotional patterns that made sense. Fear led to panic or surrender. Anger led to military preparation or desperate attacks. Pride led to negotiation or heroic last stands. But peaceful acceptance of extinction, that was not in any of their files. On Earth, Elena Vasquez stood in her office looking out at the New York skyline. Below her, people walked to work just like they did every day. Traffic moved through the streets in its usual patterns. Children played in parks while their parents watched with the same mixture of love and worry that parents had always shown. The only difference was subtle. People held themselves a little straighter. They looked each other in the eye a little longer. Conversations were a little more honest, touches a little more meaningful. It was as if humanity had collectively decided to be the best version of itself for whatever time remained. Her communication device chimed. Another message from the hegemony, the 5th one today. She read it without emotion. Secretary General Vasquez, the Hegemony Council urges you to reconsider your position. We are prepared to offer more favorable terms. The deadline can be extended to allow for proper consideration. Please respond immediately. Elena dictated her reply to her assistant. Thank you for your message. We acknowledge receipt and understand your position. Our answer remains unchanged. It was the same reply she had sent to all their messages. Polite, clear, and final. On Mars, the domed cities continued their daily routines under the red sky. In the Europa research stations, scientists kept studying the strange life forms in the ocean beneath the ice. On the farming worlds, crops were planted and tended with the same care as always, even though there might not be time for harvest. But there were changes, small ones that the hegemony sensors could not detect. Children learned to operate emergency systems that had previously been restricted to adults. Every family received small emergency kits containing enough supplies for several weeks. Technical manuals for essential systems were distributed more widely than ever before. If humanity was going to end, they would not go silently into extinction. But they would not beg either. The hegemony extended their deadline by 2 days, hoping to provoke some response. Earth acknowledged the extension with the same polite thanks they had shown for everything else, then went back to their normal activities. On the 6th day, Veltar tried a different approach. He broadcast a detailed projection of what would happen when the hegemony fleet attacked. Cities burning, space stations exploding, colonies abandoned to the void. It was meant to break human resolve, to make them understand the reality of their situation. Earth's response came 6 hours later, not from their government but from an elementary school in Prague. A 7-year-old girl named Anna had made a drawing. It showed Earth as a blue marble surrounded by stars. Below it, in careful childish handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for the information. We are not afraid." The drawing was broadcast throughout human space and became humanity's unofficial response to hegemony threats. a child's crayon drawing that somehow expressed what their leaders could not say directly. We know what you can do to us. We are not afraid. On the seventh day, as the deadline approached, the hegemony made one final attempt. They broadcast testimonials from representatives of conquered species, explaining how much better life was under hegemony rule, how peaceful it was, how prosperous, how safe. Humanity listened politely to every word, then Earth's government issued its first official statement since the ultimatum. We thank the hegemony for sharing these perspectives. We are sure that the hegemony has brought many benefits to many species. However, we have considered your offer carefully and we must respectfully maintain our original position. We wish you well in your future endeavors. As the deadline expired, Veltar realized that something unprecedented had happened. For the first time in the hegemony's 10,000-year history, they faced an enemy that refused to play by any known rules. Humanity had not panicked, had not negotiated, had not attacked, had not surrendered. They had simply continued being human, with a quiet dignity that somehow made the mighty hegemony fleet feel like schoolyard bullies threatening a child who would not cry. The universe held its breath, waiting to see what would happen when unstoppable force met immovable spirit. 2 weeks after the deadline had passed, cracks began to show in the hegemony fleet. Ambassador Veltar stood before the Council of War, his crystalline body cycling through colors that indicated deep frustration and growing uncertainty. Around the conference table, representatives of 12 species argued with increasing intensity. We should have attacked immediately when they refused, growled war leader Brocktar, his massive Corvin frame radiating barely controlled aggression. Every day we wait makes us look weak to our own people. Weakness? Science elder Nixara's mechanical voice carried a note of cold calculation. What weakness is there in taking time to understand an unprecedented situation? The humans have responded in a way that contradicts every psychological model we possess. Empath Zara Lynn floated at the edge of the group, her ethereal form shimmering with distress. Their emotional signature continues to disturb me. They maintain this acceptance. Not resignation or despair, but genuine peace with their choice. It is as if they have found something we do not understand. They have found madness, Veltar declared, his colors shifting to deep purple indicating certainty. No rational species would choose extinction over submission. They are bluffing, hoping we will hesitate long enough for them to prepare some desperate defense. Our sensors detect no military preparation, Nixara reminded him. If anything, their behavior has become even more puzzling. They continue to establish new colonies. They continue to terraform uninhabited worlds. Yesterday, they began construction on what appears to be a new university on Kepler 442b. High Admiral Zendari of the Zephyrian fleet leaned forward, his tentacles writhing with impatience. Perhaps we have been too subtle. Let me broadcast more detailed projections of their coming destruction. Show them exactly what our weapons can do to their cities, their children, their future. Zara Lynn's form flickered with alarm. You tried that approach last week. They responded by having their children send us artwork. Pictures of flowers and spaceships and families holding hands. One drawing showed a human child and a hegemony soldier playing together under alien stars. The memory of those drawings hung heavy in the chamber. What kind of species responded to threats of annihilation by having their children draw pictures of friendship? They mock us, Brocktar snarled. They show us children's pictures to demonstrate their contempt for our power. Or, Zara Lynn said quietly, they show us children's pictures to demonstrate something else entirely. Perhaps they are trying to remind us what we are about to destroy. The debate continued for hours, growing more heated with each exchange. For the first time since the formation of the hegemony, the Council could not agree on how to handle a single species. On the edges of human space, something else was happening that the hegemony's sensors could barely detect. Human cargo ships operating on what appeared to be routine trade missions were carrying unusual cargoes to distant star systems, not weapons or military supplies but seed banks and genetic archives, cultural databases and historical records, complete technological blueprints and educational materials. Lieutenant Yixtel of Hegemony Intelligence noted these shipments in her reports, but could not determine their significance. The humans were scattering their knowledge across the galaxy, like seeds thrown to the wind. Why prepare to preserve their culture if they expected to survive as a conquered people? Why scatter their technology if they plan to keep it? Meanwhile, on Earth, Elena Vasquez continued her daily routine with the same calm dignity she had shown since the ultimatum. She met with world leaders, signed routine legislation, and held her regular press conferences. When reporters asked about the hegemony fleet hanging over their world like a sword, she answered simply, "We are aware of their presence. We have made our position clear. We continue to hope for a peaceful resolution, but we will not change our fundamental stance on human independence." "Madam Secretary General," one reporter pressed, "polls show that 97% of Earth's population supports your position, even knowing the consequences. How do you explain such unity in the face of certain death?" Elena considered the question carefully. "I think," she said finally, "that humanity has simply decided that some things are more important than survival. We would rather cease to exist as free beings than continue to exist as subjects. This is not a decision we make lightly, but it is a decision we make together." The broadcast of that press conference reached every corner of human space within hours. On colony worlds and space stations, on mining platforms and research vessels, humans watched their elected leader speak for them with quiet courage. The response was immediate and universal. Every human settlement in the galaxy sent the same message back to Earth. "We stand with you. We are proud to be human." This unity began to have an unexpected effect on the hegemony forces. Species that had joined the Council after their own conquest started to remember what it felt like to face such an ultimatum themselves. They began to ask uncomfortable questions. "Why did we surrender when they did not?" whispered crew members on Quellan vessels. "Are we cowards or are they fools?" The Threnody delegation was the first to break ranks officially. Empath Zara Lynn submitted a formal objection to the Council of War. "The Threnody Collective cannot participate in the extermination of a species that faces extinction with such dignity," her statement read. "Our empathic nature makes it impossible for us to ignore the profound inner strength that humanity displays. We formally withdraw our ships from this operation." 3 smaller species followed the Threnody lead within hours, their representatives echoing the same concerns. How could they destroy a people who faced death with such grace? But it was the Vailnari Syndicate's withdrawal that truly shook the coalition. Science Elder Nixara's announcement was coldly logical as always. "Economic projections indicate that destroying humanity would eliminate the galaxy's most innovative trading partners," she stated. "Human colonies produce 17% of the galaxy's agricultural surplus, 23% of advanced medical supplies, and 31% of cutting-edge research. The economic disruption of their destruction would harm every species in the galaxy." Her real reason, which she did not state publicly, was more complex. The Vailnari had studied human behavior for decades, fascinated by their unpredictability. To destroy such a unique species seemed not just cruel but wasteful. The galaxy would be a lesser place without their strange mixture of creativity and stubbornness. War leader Brocktar found himself in an unexpected position. As the most militaristic member of the hegemony, he should have been leading the charge for immediate attack. Instead, he found himself studying recordings of human military history with growing respect. Humans had fought countless wars throughout their history, but they had also shown remarkable restraint in victory and dignity in defeat. They had codes of honor that protected civilians and prisoners. They rebuilt the homes of their enemies after conquest. They turned battlefields into memorials that honored both their own dead and those they had killed. "There is honor in how they fight," he admitted to his aide during a private moment, "but there is greater honor in how they face defeat. They stand as equals even when facing superior force. This is the behavior of true warriors." When Brocktar announced the Corvan Empire's withdrawal from the operation, his statement was brief but devastating. "The Corvan Empire recognizes humanity as a warrior people worthy of respect. We will not participate in their destruction. They have shown us what true courage looks like." Veltar watched his carefully assembled coalition crumble with growing desperation. In 3 weeks, humanity had accomplished what no military force had ever achieved. They had divided the hegemony against itself, simply by refusing to break. His own species, the Zephyrians, remained loyal to the mission. So did the Quellan hierarchy, the Stellar Dominion, and 2 minor species whose names were barely known outside diplomatic circles. But half the fleet was gone, and more ships departed each day. In desperation, Veltar ordered his remaining forces to begin targeting the outermost human colonies. Perhaps the sight of actual destruction would finally break humanity's unnatural calm. Perhaps they would finally beg for mercy when they saw their people dying. It was a decision he would regret for the rest of his very long life. The attack on Kepler Station was about to begin, and with it humanity would finally break their silence. But not in the way anyone expected. The first blast from the Zephyrian plasma cannons hit Kepler Station's outer hull at 1432 Universal Time. The agricultural station, home to 8,000 humans who grew food for 12 colony worlds, shuddered under the impact but did not immediately break apart. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched the attack through news feeds and military channels. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. Finally, humanity would show their true nature. Finally, they would break. Station Commander Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck as the second blast tore through the hydroponics bay. Emergency lights flashed red throughout the station, and the artificial gravity fluctuated as power systems began to fail. Around her, her crew worked calmly at their stations, evacuating civilians to the escape pods and sending final data transmissions to the Agricultural Ministry. "Commander," reported Lieutenant Torres from the communication station, "we're receiving surrender demands from the attacking vessel. They want us to signal our submission to hegemony authority." Sarah looked out at the attacking ships through the reinforced windows. Pretty things, really. The Zephyrian vessels looked like living crystals that swam through space, their hulls reflecting starlight in patterns that almost resembled art. It seemed strange that something so beautiful could bring such destruction. "Open a channel to all human vessels and stations," she ordered. "All frequencies." "Channel open, Commander." Sarah Chen had been born on Mars, had served 15 years in the colonial fleet, and had spent the last 5 years turning Kepler Station into one of the most productive agricultural facilities in human space. She had never expected to make the most important broadcast of her life while her station died around her. "Kepler Station to all human vessels and installations," she said, her voice calm and clear despite the explosions outside. "We are under attack and will not survive. We face the void with dignity and tact. Continue the work. The gardens of tomorrow need tending." She closed the channel and turned to her crew. "Evacuation is complete. All pods away. Final systems shut down in 3 minutes." "Commander," Torres said quietly, "the attacking ship is demanding a response to their surrender order." Sarah thought about that for a moment, watching the last escape pod disappear into the star field. 8,000 people safely away, carrying with them the seed stocks and genetic samples that would let them restart the agricultural program wherever they landed. "Tell them we're a bit busy at the moment," she said. "Perhaps they could try again later." As Kepler Station broke apart under the third barrage, its final transmission reached every corner of human space in minutes. The response was immediate and universal. Every human colony, ship, and outpost sent the same acknowledgement. Received and understood. The work continues. Ambassador Veltar had expected screams. He had expected pleas for mercy. He had expected panic and desperate negotiations. What he got instead was a lesson in human nature that would haunt him for the rest of his existence. Within hours of Kepler Station's destruction, the hegemony monitoring stations detected something that defied all understanding. Instead of retreating or surrendering, humanity began to move faster. Colony ships that had been years away from their destination suddenly accelerated using techniques that should have been beyond human technology. Existing settlements began rapid expansion protocols, building infrastructure at impossible speeds. New colonies appeared in star systems where no human had ever been recorded. "They are scattering," reported Intelligence Commander Zaltek to an emergency session of the remaining council members, "not fleeing but spreading deliberately. For every settlement we destroy, they establish 3 new ones." "Impossible," Veltar insisted. "They lack the resources for such rapid expansion." "Apparently not," Zaltek replied grimly. "Our analysis suggests they have been preparing for this contingency for years. Every colony ship carries enough genetic material and cultural archives to restart human civilization. Every settlement has emergency protocols for rapid reproduction and expansion." Science elder Nixara studied the data with growing amazement. Even with her departure from the coalition, she maintained intelligence assets to monitor the situation. "Fascinating," she transmitted to her own people. "They are not fighting a war against us. They are conducting a planned exodus. They are spreading across the galaxy faster than we can destroy them." On Earth, Elena Vasquez met with her remaining cabinet in the deep bunkers beneath Geneva. The hegemony fleet would reach Earth soon, and everyone knew how that confrontation would end. But humanity's leaders showed no signs of despair. "Colony establishment is ahead of schedule," reported Minister of Colonial Affairs David Kim. "The emergency protocols are working. Even if they destroy every existing settlement, we'll have viable populations scattered across 3,000 star systems within 6 months." "Genetic diversity?" asked Elena. More than sufficient for long-term species survival, replied Dr. Angela Santos, head of the Human Genome Project. We've been collecting and distributing DNA samples for 15 years. Every colony ship carries the genetic heritage of the entire species. Cultural preservation, every major human work of art, literature, music, and scientific knowledge has been copied and distributed, said Cultural Minister Chen Wei. Our children will know who they are and where they came from, no matter where they end up. Elena nodded slowly. They had done what they could. Humanity would survive, even if Earth did not. The psychological impact on the hegemony was devastating. They had conquered dozens of species over the millennia, but they had always been able to point to the survivors and say, "See, they are better off under our protection." Now they faced the possibility of being remembered as the force that scattered humanity across the galaxy like seeds on the wind. Empath Zara Lynn, monitoring the situation from her withdrawn fleet, sent a final message to the Hegemony Council. What you are creating is not victory. You are creating a legend. In 1,000 years, every species in the galaxy will remember humanity as the people who chose freedom over life, dignity over survival, and they will remember the hegemony as the force that destroyed them for refusing to kneel. The breaking point came when images from the attacked colonies began circulating through hegemony space. Not images of destruction, but images of human behavior during the attacks. On Kepler Station, security recordings showed the final moments before evacuation. Humans helping elderly civilians to the escape pods first, engineers staying at their posts to ensure others could escape safely, children comforting frightened adults. Commander Chen's final transmission, spoken with the same calm dignity she might have used to discuss the weather. Young hegemony citizens, raised on stories of honorable conquest and justified rule, watched these recordings with growing unease. They had been told that humans were dangerous expansionists who refused to accept reasonable authority. The recordings showed something else entirely. Ordinary people facing extinction with extraordinary grace. Protests began on hegemony worlds. Not violent uprisings, but quiet demonstrations of solidarity with humanity. Zephyrian youths held candlelight vigils. Quellan students organized peaceful marches. Even some Corvan warriors gathered in public squares to honor what they called the dignity of the doomed humans. The most damaging protest came from an unexpected source. On the hegemony capital world, representatives of the conquered species held a joint assembly. For the first time in 10,000 years, the subjects of the hegemony spoke with one voice. "We surrendered because we believed there was no choice," read their joint statement. "Humanity has shown us that there was always a choice. We could have chosen dignity over survival, principles over life. We chose to live as subjects rather than die as free beings. History will judge which decision showed greater wisdom." Ambassador Veltar found himself commanding a fleet that grew smaller each day, not from enemy action, but from mass desertion. Ships that had served the hegemony for centuries quietly slipped away to neutral space, their crews unable to participate in what increasingly looked like the bullying of children who refused to cry. The final blow to Veltar's coalition came from an unexpected source: his own people. The Zephyrian civilian government, responding to planet-wide protests, recalled their military forces. "The Zephyrian people do not wish to be remembered as the destroyers of humanity," announced their High Council. "We have observed human behavior throughout this crisis, and we find their dignity more impressive than our power. We withdraw from this operation with honor intact." As his flagship hung alone in the void above Earth, surrounded only by a handful of vessels from minor species afraid to abandon the coalition, Veltar finally understood what humanity had done. They had not defeated the hegemony through superior technology or military strategy. They had defeated it by refusing to act like victims. They had maintained their dignity so completely, so consistently, that they had forced their enemies to question the morality of their own actions. In trying to destroy humanity's body, the hegemony had revealed the poverty of their own soul, and now the entire galaxy was watching. Ambassador Veltar stood alone on the bridge of his flagship, watching Earth turn slowly beneath him. His once mighty coalition had shrunk to 12 vessels, crewed by species too afraid to withdraw and too committed to the old ways to question their orders. The blue-green world below looked peaceful in the starlight, its cities glowing like scattered jewels. It had been 2 months since the ultimatum expired. 2 months of watching his alliance crumble, while humanity continued their impossible response to inevitable destruction. They still had not begged. They still had not broken. They had simply continued being themselves with such quiet dignity that they had forced the galaxy to choose sides. "Sir," reported his communications officer, "the Earth government is requesting permission to transmit a final message." Veltar's crystalline form shifted through tired colors. "What kind of message?" "They say it is a farewell address to human colonies. They request that we allow them to broadcast on all frequencies for 10 minutes before we begin the final attack." Even now, faced with the destruction of their homeworld, the humans were being polite. They were asking permission from their executioners to say goodbye to their children. "Grant their request," Veltar said quietly. Perhaps hearing humanity's final desperation would ease the weight that had been growing in his chest for weeks. On Earth, Elena Vasquez sat in her office one last time. Outside her windows, Geneva looked exactly as it had on any peaceful spring morning. People walked to work, children played in parks, and traffic moved through the streets with its usual chaotic efficiency. The only difference was the sense of ceremony that seemed to hang over everything, as if the entire city were attending a wake for itself. Her communication device activated, and she found herself speaking to 8 billion humans on Earth and 30 million more scattered across the galaxy in their new colonies. "My fellow humans," she began, "this is likely the last message that will be broadcast from Earth. In a few minutes, our world will come under final attack from forces we cannot resist. I want to spend these last moments not dwelling on our end, but celebrating who we have chosen to be." On colony worlds throughout human space, families gathered around communication devices to hear their leaders' final words. On the newest settlements, where humans were still building basic shelters under alien stars, work stopped as everyone listened to the voice from the world they would never see again. 2 months ago, we were given a choice, Elena continued. Submit to rule by others or face extinction. We chose extinction, not because we wanted to die, but because we wanted to live as ourselves. We chose to remain human until the very end. In the hegemony fleet, even the attacking crews found themselves listening to the broadcast. They had expected to hear begging or accusation or desperate final threats. Instead, they heard something that would echo in their minds for the rest of their lives. "I am proud of humanity today," Elena said, "not because we are about to die with courage, but because we have lived with honor. In these past months, I have seen our species at its finest. I have seen humans help strangers without thought of reward. I have seen children comfort frightened adults. I have seen people work together to build new homes for their descendants among distant stars." On the monitoring stations throughout hegemony space, intelligence officers translated Elena's words into hundreds of languages, broadcasting them to species that had made different choices when faced with similar ultimatums. The contrast was not lost on anyone. "The universe is vast," Elena continued, "and it contains room for many different approaches to life. The hegemony has chosen order and uniformity. We have chosen diversity and independence. Neither approach is inherently wrong, but they cannot coexist when one demands the submission of the other." Veltar listened to the speech with growing discomfort. Even now, facing the end of her species, the human leader was not condemning her enemies. She was simply explaining her people's choice with the same calm rationality she had shown throughout the crisis. "To our children among the stars," Elena said, "remember that you carry more than human DNA to your new homes. You carry human values. Treat others with dignity. Build societies based on consent rather than force. Explore the universe with wonder, not conquest. Be the humans that Earth would be proud to call her children." On New Terra, the most established of the recent colonies, Governor Maria Santos gathered her people in the central square. Around her, 10,000 humans who had fled Earth during the crisis listened to their former leader's voice echo across impossible distances. "To the species of the hegemony who chose honor over orders," Elena continued, "humanity thanks you. Your refusal to participate in our destruction shows that conscience exists throughout the galaxy. Perhaps someday your example will inspire others to choose freedom over security." These words had an immediate effect throughout hegemony space. On worlds where the conquered species lived under hegemony rule, humans had become symbols of resistance. Not violent resistance, but the quiet resistance of people who refused to surrender their dignity, regardless of the cost. "Finally," Elena said, "to those who are about to destroy us, we forgive you. You believe you are bringing order to chaos, peace to conflict. We disagree with your methods, but we do not hate you for them. The universe will judge which approach was correct. We trust in that judgment, forgiveness. In her final moments, the leader of humanity was offering forgiveness to the forces that were about to exterminate her species. On Veltar's bridge, even his most hardened officers found themselves struggling with emotions they had never experienced. In closing, Elena said, I want to share something a human child wrote last week when she learned that Earth would not survive. Her name is Anna, and she is 7 years old. She wrote, The stars are very pretty tonight. I think they are saying goodbye to us. But we will be with them soon, so it's not really goodbye. It's more like see you later. Elena paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a note of wonder. Out of the mouths of babes comes wisdom. Anna is right. This is not goodbye. Humanity will be among the stars, in ways we never imagined when we first looked up at the night sky and dreamed of reaching them. The broadcast ended with a simple statement. Farewell, Earth. Hello, universe. The humans are coming. Across human space, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Every colony, every ship, every outpost responded with the same message. Received and acknowledged. We carry the flame. But something else happened that no one had expected. Throughout hegemony space, on worlds that had been conquered and subjects for centuries, a new sound began to emerge. It started quietly, almost imperceptibly, but grew stronger with each passing hour, the sound of applause. On the Quellan homeworld, citizens emerged from their homes to stand in public squares, applauding in the direction of Earth. On Vailnari stations, mechanical beings who had never understood emotion found themselves expressing what could only be called admiration for humanity's final dignity. Even on the Zephyrian capital, crowds gathered to honor the humans who had chosen death over dishonor. For the first time in 10,000 years, the subjects of the hegemony were publicly celebrating defiance of their rulers. Veltar watched these demonstrations with growing horror. In trying to make an example of humanity, he had instead made heroes of them. Their sacrifice was inspiring the very rebellion that the hegemony's rule was designed to prevent. His communication system activated with an incoming message from the Hegemony High Council. He accepted it with dread. Ambassador Veltar, came the voice of Supreme Counselor Nexusera. You are hereby ordered to cease all hostile actions against humanity and withdraw immediately to Council space. Sir, we are minutes away from final victory. What you are minutes away from is creating martyrs whose memory will inspire rebellion throughout our territory for the next 1,000 years. The humans have already won, Veltar. They have done something we thought was impossible. They have made submission look cowardly and resistance look noble. Veltar stared at Earth through his ship's viewports. So close to ending the threat humanity represented, yet forced to admit that the threat had already spread far beyond anything his weapons could destroy. Our intelligence. Reports indicate that human colonies are being established faster than our fleet could possibly destroy them, the Supreme Counselor continued. More importantly, 3 of our member species are experiencing civil unrest inspired by human behavior. The hegemony faces its greatest internal crisis in millennia. What are my orders, sir? Stand down, withdraw, and pray to whatever forces govern the universe that humanity will prove more gracious in victory than we have been in our attempted conquest. As the hegemony fleet began its withdrawal from Earth orbit, Elena Vasquez received a final transmission from Ambassador Veltar himself. Secretary General Vasquez, the message began, the hegemony fleet is withdrawing. Your species has achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. You have defeated a superior military force without firing a shot. How you accomplished this I do not understand. But I acknowledge that you have won. Elena dictated her response carefully. Ambassador Veltar, humanity thanks you for your message. We have never considered this a conflict that required victory or defeat.